in miracles.
I believe I'm the best person to lead Labor back into government.
It's not a race, right? It's not a competition.
The grand slam of pandemic failure.
We will get through this together.
Every one of us has to hold a hose.
That was a political problem. Every voice matters.
I will not let you down.
Generation partnership.
I don't think I know.
Now we want to put the past 2 years behind us. We need to put this government behind us.
There's no one to help. Have a look at all the rubbish.
It has taken everybody by surprise. Everyone has a role to play. This election is about you.
I'm ready. We are ready.
Are now ahead.
Labor leader Anthony Albanese has spent a lifetime in politics, but has he done enough at the end of this campaign to convince Australians he has what it takes to lead the country?
I know Labor can do better, and I know Australians deserve better.
Scott Morrison is behind in the polls. He has been all year. If he pulls off a victory, he'll be the first Prime Minister in 18 years to win back-to-back elections.
I'm seeking a second term because I'm just warming up.
It's a race to 76 seats in majority government, precisely where the coalition starts tonight, where Labor needs to gain 7 seats for government in its own right.
Polls on the East Coast have now closed, counting has begun, and soon the results will be in as Australia votes. Hello and welcome to Australia Votes. This is one of the most unusual elections ever in Australia. There are so many unprecedented elements and so many variables that it would be a bold person who'd make a firm prediction right now. The opinion polls have Labor very comfortably ahead, but they did in 2019 as well. So the question is whether they can be trusted this time around. We'll help you make sense of it all over the coming hours, of course, with the help of our indispensable ABC Chief Election Analyst, Anthony Green. Anthony, where do we start? Simon Birmingham.
Well, Lee, people have been overwhelmingly positive and polite, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's indicative of the result. I've seen and heard that on polling booths before. Australians engage, I think, with great responsibility in election day, and they do so, generally speaking, with a care and a regard for the booth workers and the volunteers who've been out there in sunshine in some parts of the country and torrential rain in other parts of the country. But overall, it certainly doesn't feel like they've been the quintessential baseball bats out there. It's been a case where the voters going through have often known their minds, but they've been friendly and polite in doing so.
Tanya?
Oh yeah, I agree with Simon that people have been friendly and polite. I have sensed a real it's time for a change feeling. I've been in my own electorate of Sydney today, going from booth to booth. Very long queues, people very keen to vote, even with the big numbers in pre-poll. I was amazed at how long the queues were, and I mean, in my electorate at least, a very strong sense that it's time for a change.
All right, we'll come back to you shortly.
A bit of a personality or character contest.
Andrew?
Look, I think it's going to be really fascinating and exciting tonight, but I suspect that this might be a historical election insofar as it heralds the ending of this two-party system that for the first time...
Thank you very much, Anthony. Let me bring you in, Simon and Tanya, to just ask your thoughts about a few of the things that we've heard people saying there. The first thing I want to do is actually just put you on the spot like David did. Does Labor expect to win tonight, Tanya?
We're hopeful, but it's way too early to tell.
And is there that sense, as Patricia Carvelis said, of signs look good, but you don't want to get too hopeful because of last time?
Well, you know, if you were believing the polling, you would say we had a good chance, but we were very much misled by the polling last time, so I don't think anybody's really accepting what the polls tell us just yet.
And Simon, do you accept that, as people have been saying, the path for your side to victory is very problematic?
Lee, I think it's certainly a challenging path. To get a fourth term is never easy in Australian politics. It's only been done a handful of times before. And so in that sense, we have had to work very hard. We can see that there are pathways and there are potentially multiple pathways that are there, dependent upon which seats end up being a challenge. And equally, as you've heard from some of the pundits, there could be greater variability in seats that hadn't been predicted before. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
What about this situation where we could end up with a permanent arrangement in Australia where the two major parties are getting primary votes that are in the 30%? Do you think that could be a permanent state of affairs, and what effect is that going to have on politics? Simon first.
Look, I hope it isn't, Lee. I think it is important that we have strong parties of government that can present compelling cases and give Australians that chance and that choice in that regard. And I think that's important for the stability of government. I think it's important in terms of also the fact that for our country, we need that sense of stable government that can make strong decisions, provide leadership when it's necessary. And so we'll see again tonight as to whether just the extent of talk about independents or minor parties actually materialises. Once more, we could see that some of the hype is actually greater than the outcome. But it is something I think both parties need to be conscious of in terms of ensuring that we remain relevant to a country that has a very sound, as we were discussing before, democratic system, and equally a country that has so much that is going right in our nation.
What's your take, Tanya, on this issue of primary votes in that 30% range?
Look, I think it is a real sign that voters haven't felt listened to and heard for a while. And it is up to, I think, major parties to show that we are listening and we are responding to the issues that voters keep raising with us. And I think the really interesting thing about the Teal independents is that they are very natural Liberal voters who don't feel like they have a home in the Liberal Party anymore. So I think the rise of minor parties is an opportunity and I suppose a call for major parties to have a look at what we're not getting right.
Lee, I think it's quite.
They're all just coming together in this perfect storm in this election.
Simon, do you agree with Tanya's point that people feel not listened to by the major parties?
Look, I think if we do see that sort of drop, indeed, that is a message that we will all have to take. We haven't seen a party win government in this country with a primary less than about 42% in recent times, or indeed I think ever. So the work there for all of us, if that materialises, is that we have to make sure we build up that natural support again and that we listen to messages, which out of every election you have to listen to those messages. But we haven't got the results yet, so we don't know precisely where that will be. I don't think we should discount the disruptive nature of COVID under the scenes as well. The talk and discussion about whether there's a UAP vote and what else happened. My experience from the South Australian state election was that even though COVID wasn't front and centre of the debate, certainly the irritations and the annoyances people had had in their lives had certainly mounted up to have an impact.
Yeah, I think the other really interesting thing about the minor party vote is minor parties only ever have to say, we would like to do this. They never have to say how they would do it or how they would pay for it or any of that, how they would achieve it. And I've been really interested in the UAP vote. When you see people talking about why they're voting for the UAP, the sort of things they say, Clive Palmer's going to keep my mortgage at below 3%. How would he ever do that? He never has to answer the question of how he would ever do that. And I think that's a really unhealthy thing in our democracy. There's no value set on what is actually achievable.
There are parallels there as well to the US under Trump, because you saw voters who would have traditionally voted Democrat, working class people, go right across to the far right because that kind of thing was offered, and that was the message that they want to hear. So the question is whether it's not just going to be the right that bleeds to the UAP, but that it could be the left as well. We've got Barnaby Joyce standing by in his seat of New England. We'll be talking to him in Tamworth in a second. But first of all, Anthony Green will give us a bit of a snapshot.
I think that this is going to be really interesting because what you might see here, the Labor can't win without regional seats. It's just not possible. They can't win.
It is 6:41 p.m. with a tiny 0.2% of the vote counted. This is Australia Votes. You've got some more figures for us, Anthony.
Yeah, we've got some figures from the electorate of Eden-Monaro, which, of course, Christy McBain holds. She won at the Dubai election 2 years ago when Mike Kelly retired. The only very small numbers at this stage, 0.2%. It's 2 polling places. We're estimating a two-party preferred swing of 7.4% to Labor. I would point out the Liberal Party got a candidate in the field very late here, and there is now a sitting member courtesy of the by-election, so I wouldn't necessarily hang on to that, especially with only 2 polling places. Gilmore, which is down on the south coast, Fiona Phillips won it for the Labor Party last election. Andrew Constance, former Transport Minister in the New South Wales government, he's ahead on first preferences. Got an advantage this time because there was a national candidate getting about 10% of the vote last time, and that shows up, I think, the two-party preferred swing we're seeing is 8.4% to the Liberal Party. That's 4 first preference booths, no polling places. So, again, as with Eden Monero, that's a very early figure, so I wouldn't necessarily rely on exactly, but just to show that we're getting the numbers. This is Lyons, the big big Tasmanian electorate, central Tasmanian electorate, 35-22. The Greens, 17. A feature at the moment is quite a large vote for all the minor parties. One Nation is doing well, the Jackie Lambie network in this electorate. So whether that flows through to the bigger townships or whether this is a feature of the small communities we're getting in at this stage, we're getting much earlier figures this time from some of these communities simply because there's fewer votes to count because so many of people have voted beforehand. So there seems to be a very early count coming in. Now, this was interesting in Mackellar, the first polling place in, I think it's Coleroy Beach, Coleroy Plateau North. The Liberal vote has taken a big hit on first preferences. It's down about 18% on first preferences. It is only 1 polling place, but Sophie Scomps, this is a GP on the northern beaches of Sydney. This is one of those teal independents that we'll be watching through the evening. We'll see how that unfolds later in the evening, but that's just to keep a track of the early figures coming in.
OK, thank you very much. Tanya, I just wanted to ask, because Barnaby Joyce mentioned it, have you had any word today about how things were in Hunter?
Look, I haven't had a look at the results for Hunter yet, but I was really listening to Barnaby talking about this sort of city-country divide that really isn't represented by those figures that Anthony's going through then. Like, I've been looking at the early figures for Eden Monero, which look very good. I mean, we've got a fantastic candidate in Christy McBain then. It's only 2 booths, but very early. Richmond, Gilmore, I mean, these are seats that are Labor seats because they've got really great local women representing them. And I think that's that local champion, I think that's a really important element of this election.
Simon?
Campaign locally here.
All right, Dan, Rory, thank you very much. We're going to talk now to Stan Grant, who's the ABC's international affairs analyst. Foreign policy, Stan, has come up quite a bit during this campaign, particularly around that deal, the security deal between China and the Solomon Islands. For whoever wins government, what do you think are going to be the major challenges in foreign policy?
Lee, it is China, China and China. And, of course, if Anthony Albanese wins office tonight, becomes Prime Minister, first on his list is to attend the Quad meeting with Penny Wong, if she's Foreign Minister, to sit down with partners like the United States, India and Japan, which is all about trying to deal with the impact of China's rise throughout the region, its increasing assertiveness, aggression. You know, throughout the campaign, of course, we've heard warnings of the drumbeats of war, and Peter Dutton saying we need to prepare for war. Labor.
Thank you, Simon. Let's go to Anthony now for a summary of where things are at.
Yeah, this is slightly later than last time, but at the moment, this is, again, a very difficult picture to pull apart. And at the moment, again, it doesn't look like the opinion polls today. It's just hard to work out exactly what it's looking like at the moment because there's no one swing going on from seat to seat. Let's look at the overall votes. Now, we're now at 11.7%. And consistently now, since about 3 or 4% of the vote, the figures have been at Coalition 36%, Labor 31%. So that's not what the opinion polls report. It's high for the Coalition, lower for Labor. The Greens are on 12. That is up on the last election. One Nation is 5.3, United Australia 4.8, and there's a big vote for others. A lot of those independents dotted around the country, and there's so many, we're actually having a difficulty trying to track them down in the computer system. Change in vote. The Coalition vote's down 5.5, Labor's down 2.6. Now, this is settling in as a figure. Now, the one caveat I would say, there's still a lot more vote from outside of the metropolitan areas in. The swing doesn't appear to be quite as bad in the metropolitan areas. So, at the moment, the weightage of rural votes is making that swing against Labor bigger. The Greens are up 2%. One Nation is up 2%, largely because they're standing more candidates. The vote is actually down in the seats they contested last time. UAP is up 1.4 and others up 2.5. Now, all this is translating into a 1.6% swing. So Labor's slightly ahead at the moment. Now, the opinion poll this morning was indicating 53% and 1.6%. There's nothing in the figures we've got so far that's pointing towards that. We're correcting from where the information is from. But as I said, one of the difficulties that we're having is that the first preference vote is highly fragmented and not at all what you're expecting. There seems to be much bigger swings in Queensland, for instance, but some of those swings to Labor in Queensland might be turning into victories for the Greens. Some of the big swings against the Liberal Party in New South Wales may be turning into victories for the Independents. The best figure we can see at the moment as a projection from the numbers is a hung parliament. There's no clear trend. There's nobody, and it's even difficult to work out which party is going to end up with more seats. But at the moment, what I would say is the figures we're seeing are not this morning's opinion poll. I'm repeating myself. This is the second election in a row I've done this about this time of night. But it's not clear what this is producing. At the best, at the moment, I'm seeing is a hung parliament. On the numbers I'm seeing at the moment, Labor might end up with more seats. That's the one thing I'd say in Labor's favour. That's because of all those independents. So it's, at the moment, we may be in for a long night to work out what's happened. We then may be in for a long week to work out which wins which seats. And we may be in for 2 or 3 weeks while everyone works out who's the government. So I don't know who'll be going to the Quad meeting next week at this stage. One thing I will say, Craig Kelly will not be Prime Minister. That's one prediction I am happy to make.
Anthony Manton retaining his seat.
Thanks very much.
I hope you can hear me there. There's an awful lot of noise behind you. You might have some company as well from the member for Griffith in Brisbane.
Yes, look, we've been campaigning really strongly in seats in inner city Brisbane, as well as seats like Richmond in northern New South Wales, and the seats like Macnamara that have been mentioned here. We've been campaigning strongly now there for a couple of years, and we've been offering a real alternative to the current government. I think we're waiting to see the pre-poll results that will come in for a number of those other seats. The pre-poll across the country, but especially in those seats, was pretty big. So we look, I guess, cautious optimism. Wait and see the results of the pre-poll, though.
Adam Bant, it's Annabelle Crabb here. Look, at this stage, it's not an election. It looks more like a key party. You know, there's votes going everywhere to minor parties at the expense of the major parties. I'm interested in your observations about what's happening in Queensland in particular. It's only 3 years since the Stop Adani campaign got a bit of a clip around the ears from Queensland, and now you're winning lower house seats, having huge swings even in the seat of Dixon. How do you make sense of all of this?
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, we laid out a pretty clear strategy, and we've been following it since then. First is those campaigns, in particular in Queensland, have been really strong people-powered campaigns. In the seat of Griffith, for example, they've knocked on every door and had over 30,000 conversations with voters in that seat, and that's been our strategy across those inner-city Brisbane seats, but also elsewhere. This is secondly on some key questions, economic questions, cost of living questions. We've offered a real alternative. We've been really clear during the course of this parliament, but also as we've been running those campaigns. Look, don't give Clive Palmer a $9,000 tax cut while people are living in poverty and can't afford to get their teeth fixed. And unlike the others in Parliament.
Just over 19% of the vote counted. This is Australia Votes. Anthony Green, can you give us a summary of where things are up to, please?
Well, the first thing I say, I just want to deal with those independent seats in Sydney. We put a hold on those seats. Because we don't have a history of the two candidates preferred in any of those seats, we decided to be cautious and manually put a block on them so the computer won't give them away automatically. If I lift that block at the moment, then Mackellar, North Sydney, Wentworth and Goldstein will all tip over to be won by the independents. Now, because it's just taking time to get these counts in, I'm not prepared to do that. So at the moment, if I turn those bars off, the Liberal Party would lose 4 seats. It's just really, I think it's, given the situation we're looking at tonight and given pre-poll voting and postal voting, I think it's best to be cautious. But and I'll just bring up the electorate cowper as an example here. The National Party vote's only 37 and there's an independent 28. And the change in vote that's occurring there, Remembering there was an independent last time, Rob Oakeshott run, well, the independent vote is up 4%, as is the other vote, and the national vote is down 10% from a low figure last time. So at the moment, I would think we haven't got a preference count for that seat, but I would say at the moment that the National Party's got a bit of a problem in Cowper. So there's quite a number of these seats around the country where we've got now. Now, you're talking about the trend, the national figure. I'll just bring that up again because this is, again, these are the same, the numbers are settling at this level. 36% in the LNP, Labor 31, the Greens 12, One Nation and the UAP both on about 5. As again, let's go to the change in vote there. The drop is in the coalition vote. The Labor vote's down 2.7, Green vote up, One Nation vote up. Again, the One Nation vote is only up because they're standing more candidates. It's not up in the seats they contested last time. The UAP vote is slightly up, and the others are up 2.5, and that's translating into the moment into a two-party swing of 1.8%. Labor is slightly ahead. All our projections at the moment indicate Labor is going to win more seats than the coalition, but at the moment it's unclear whether Labor can get to a majority position. At the moment, because of those independents, it's very difficult to see how the coalition can get to a majority position. Our best projection at the moment, without diving in and pulling apart all sorts of seats, is that Labor will probably end up with more seats than the coalition. It's just very difficult to work out. And of course, it's 8 o'clock now, we've got Western Australia to come.
Anthony, can I ask, if you did turn that block off and those seats that you mentioned did all, we awarded them all to the independents, then would it still be a hung parliament situation?
If I turn that block off, that was what produced the hung parliament. I've just got a lot of... If I just... let me show the seats we are giving away at the moment. And I think this will be slightly higher than the bottom of frame. We've got Labor on 59, Greens 1, others 5, Coalition 46. Now, Labor could lose some seats. The Greens, the Coalition will lose seats, the Independents and the others. Let's put some more seats which are leaning that way. Some likelies, and Labor's up to 61 and the Coalition's still on 47. And if I remove those blocks, I think the Coalition vote would drop and the crossbench would grow.
OK.
So there's a lot of seats still in doubt. I think we're about to look at some of the two-party contests which are worth watching. But it's a long night.
And is that block, can I check, have you only got that in place on those Teal Liberal seats, or is that affecting any other seats as well?
The seats, most of the seats, we have a long history of doing polling place matchings, it's called. You calculate the swing booth by booth. It goes completely out the window when you haven't got a traditional contest between the two parties. And that's what's happening in quite a number of seats. All these Teal independent seats have got that issue. At the moment, in all of those seats, we're projecting the Liberal Party to be in the high 30s or low 40s. And as I said, if I remove that block at the moment, Goldstein, North Sydney, McKellar and Wentworth would go. So that's what I'm saying. There's also some other seats. We've got Ryan, which is LNP held, Brisbane, Griffith and McNamara, which could all be won by the Greens, and that's 2 Liberal and 2 Coalition seats.
Anthony, could you take us to
the seat of Deakin? I mentioned that earlier, but that's a problem as well. We've been taking a bit of a look, though, at what's going on, some trends here and there, and I want to show you the seats in Australia that have the highest proportion of Chinese language speakers. Here they are. So you've got 1 on the Labor side, which is Parramatta, and then you've got 4 over here, Reid, Chisholm, we just spoke about, Banks and Deakin. And you can see on the map where they are. We're talking about Sydney and Melbourne seats here, and 2 of them have already changed hands. How do the swings in these Chinese language seats, or seats with the highest proportion of Chinese language speakers, how do the swings in these seats compare to what we're seeing nationally? We'll take a look. Down the bottom is the national swing at the moment, 1.9% towards Labor on a two-party preferred basis. Now have a look at what's going on in these seats of the highest proportion of Chinese language speakers. So in Chisholm, it's 5.5%. In Reid and Banks, let's have a look at those seats, Parramatta and Deakin as well. You can see that we're seeing much bigger swings towards Labor than the national average swing at the moment, except in the seat of Parramatta. It's a little under. It's still a swing to Labor at the moment, which has just changed since about 10 minutes ago when we looked at it, but it's not quite at the national swing, and that may be because of the particular factor in Parramatta of the candidate, Andrew Charlton, being dropped in and some controversy around that. But the point is, have a look at those numbers. The swings are greater than the national average swing in these seats of the highest proportion of Chinese language speakers. Banks, I should point out, David Coleman, it's pretty much on the money where the national swing is. So what does that tell us? Is this part of the story of why we're seeing the shift tonight? Tony Barry, what does that tell you?
Well, it's consistent with the theme that we discussed earlier. This is a series of by-elections all around Australia in different segments. You know, the teal seats, obviously, coal-sensitive seats, but also the seats where there's a stronger Chinese community. And what we're seeing here is it's totally over-indexed compared to the national average. And the primary vote for the Liberal Party is losing altitude, and losing altitude fast. So the political fault line, of course, is housing affordability. There could be some crossover there, but I think these numbers are...
Does it have anything to do, do you think, with the Prime Minister's position and the government's position on China?
I think undoubtedly national security comes into it. Perhaps the language was a bit too hairy-chested, and we're now seeing, you know, some dramatic swings against the government
in those parts of Australia. Coles, let me ask you generally though, how are you feeling about where Labor's at this point in the night?
Well, in the state of Victoria...
Thank you very much. Tanya, what do you make of that analysis there, that it's the poorer electorates giving Labor a harder go?
Oh, well, I think in a couple of them it's still too early to see. And by and large, I'd say that there's some very encouraging results for Labor tonight. So I'm looking at seats that we're hopeful of picking up. I'd be focusing on those results.
Simon, what did you...
Going to be crucial.
I'm struck that when we talk to MPs in the kind of inner city seats and candidates in those seats, that they talk about integrity, they talk about climate change. When you talk to people in the outer seats, they're talking about health, housing, cost of living. Is there a problem perhaps for Labor, Tanya, that you're associated with the former, you know, with the big city kind of issues, rather than those issues that you traditionally were associated with, that people are feeling like, well, you're not hearing me on housing affordability, you're not hearing me on health services and so on?
Look, I think this election has been absolutely solidly about cost of living and wages. I think Anthony would have spoken more about cost of living pressures and you know, a wage rise for low-income earners in particular, probably more than anything else during this campaign. I do think it's interesting that there is obviously a very strong signal coming from a lot of electorates that climate and integrity commission and equality between men and women, the issues that the Teals are running on, have really struck a chord with a lot of voters, though.
But Tanya, why isn't the Labor Party picking up those votes? I mean, you've...
Well, they're people who've always voted Liberal in the past. It's a big jump to go from being a lifelong Liberal voter, and some of these candidates, you know, they're Liberal pedigrees, they're... you know, fathers, usually grandfathers, uncles have been members of the Liberal Party in Parliament. It is a big jump for someone who has always voted Liberal, who comes from a Liberal family, to make the jump straight to Labor.
But in Queensland, they're jumping to the Greens. That's a bigger jump than the jump to Labor, surely. Why is that?
I don't think it is necessarily, because I think those voters are trying to send a message. They don't think that they're going to have a Green government on Monday. They're trying to send a message that climate change is important to them, a National Integrity Commission with teeth is important to them, and equality between men and women. I think it's really instructive that a lot of these candidates are very articulate professional women.
But if you two were to form a coalition, you've just suffered... if you were part of a coalition, you've just suffered an 8.1% swing, according to the count so far.
What do you mean? If our parties...
If you two were in a coalition, yep, you'd be on... You're now on 66%, so you're down by a combined 8 and a bit.
Yeah, well, I think... I mean... But everybody's saying it tonight. The vote is fracturing all over the place. What is interesting, if you look at seats like Dixon, where I think people would have imagined that the minor party vote would go to One Nation or it would go to the Palmer United Australia Party, it's actually a bigger Green vote there than you would think.
If you two were in a coalition, people might vote for that party.
That's very flattering. There might be some issues still to resolve.
I would find it weird.
Australia in the Northern Territory. The change in vote is, again, it's the same figures. The Liberal vote's down 2.7, 2.1. Let's go to the chamber, because there's something I want to talk about in the chamber. The seats we're definitely giving away. If I mark the seats 1, we've got Labor on 62, the Coalition 46, the Greens 1, 5 others. We're going to add a few seats leaning one way or the other, and we get Labor up to 64, the Coalition's still on 46. Now, the Coalition will pick up some seats when Western Australia comes in. Labor will pick up seats when Western Australia come in. They've got 5 seats in Western Australia they're expected to hold, which gets Labor to 69, and they may pick up 1 or 2 seats. So that gets Labor above 70. I can't get, with those independents doing well, I can't get the Coalition to 70. At the moment, I can't see the coalition getting to majority government on these numbers, unless the postal and pre-poll trends are completely different previously. But at the moment, the coalition, I can't get a path for them to get to 70 seats. Maybe in the mid to high 60s, but I can't get them to 70. I can get Labor over 70. Now, there's a lot more counting to come. We've only got 28% of the vote counted. And I'll make one other point. I'm getting lots and lots of emails at the moment saying, your count's wrong, your count's wrong, your count's wrong. Particularly in seats like Brisbane, Ryan, Griffith, McNamara. For people at home listening, they've got to understand the counting process. The Electoral Commission nominates 2 candidates beforehand and they count a preference count. And the preference count is the most accurate count you can get. And they continue with it until it is absolutely clear that the 2 candidates they're counting to are not the final 2. And in Brisbane, McNamara, Ryan, it's not clear who's going to come second and third. So they're continuing that count. And to me, for instance, in Brisbane, we've changed our position on it. So the LNP, we've said they cannot hold that seat. We're just not sure whether it's the Greens or Labor who've won it. We think the Greens will win Griffith. But again, that's not the preference count we're getting, so we're holding. So people are sending me emails saying the preference count's coming is wrong. Well, we're sticking with the counts we've got. And where we've turned off the count, our system is going to flip-flop backwards and forwards about who's in the lead because the first preference order is changing. So we live in a preferential voting system. You have to determine the order of the candidates to determine the knockout. But on election night, you can't determine the order of the candidates until all the votes are counted. So we will continue with the counts that's going there. And so people are sending me the emails saying the counts are wrong.
Who are these people?
Sending him emails.
Who are these people? I love you're checking them, though. Yeah. That's amazing.
So they keep popping up on my screen. If I close my email, I wouldn't get the pop-up.
Andrew and I are both very used to these sorts of emails.
You can bring it up, and I'm not sure if they can try now. Anyway, what's happening is the two-party preferred. We've got Kate Taney just ahead, but the swing is 15%. And now I haven't got a matched preference count in that polling place, in that electorate. I've only got a matched first preference. And Celia Hammond on first preferences is tracking towards 40%.
Okay,
so
that would
Anthony,
be a big result, wouldn't it?
Can I then get you, if that sea of red is what's going on in WA, can I get you then to look at what are we talking about then in the House of Reps? Are you in a position yet to be able to call?
Oh, majority or not? No.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the seats won. We've got Labor on 71, the Coalition on 49, 2 Greens and 7 others. When we add in the likelies, we've got Labor up to 72. So I've still haven't got Labor to the total. I mean, the difficulty is there's a couple of seats that just can't work out at the moment.
Okay, is it fair to say, though, that there's no other possibility than that Anthony Albanese will be the 31st Prime Minister of Australia?
You want me to call the 31st Prime Minister of Australia? Look, the coalition...
Well, I just can't see what's the other... Who else is it going to be?
I can't see the coalition getting above 60. Now, unless the Labor Party sat on its high horse and said, we've got to 74, that's not 76, we're not forming government. There is no alternative government in that parliament. If the Labor Party refuses to form government...
Is that what you do, Tanya?
Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing that.
That's not the vibe I'm getting from Tanya.
The logistics of it is the Prime Minister has the right to do the first negotiation. And if Labor then says, we're not going to form government, the government stays in office. But I cannot imagine that happen. Whatever anybody said about deals beforehand, I cannot imagine that happening. And Labor may yet reach 76. It's just a bit hard to do that exact maths. Well, the coalition is just miles short.
A Labor source is telling me that
majority that happened last time.
So what kind of slide is this?
Vote. Sorry?
What kind of slide is this?
Let me bring in Tanya Plibersek here.
A very messy one.
Well, let me bring in Tanya because... when you look at the coalition's result, that should be a landslide basically for Labor, but it's not because there's so many others and Greens. So I guess the question for you is, what has Labor done wrong that it hasn't been a landslide for you?
I don't know that you can draw conclusions about what we've done wrong when we are obviously the party that is most likely to be able to form government.
Yeah, but it's not decisive.
And a win is a win is a win. And
that is true.
On 31.7%.
In every state except for WA.
Less than a third of Australians have voted for you.
Particularly in this environment where around the world people are worried about change. We've been through the pandemic. There's economic insecurity. I think... I'm focused on what we've done right because that's looking very good to me.
People, as you say,
that's looking good to me.
People are tired of change. Let's hold that thought because I know Anthony wants to tell us something about Kooyong.
Borderline una ataga.
It is 10:02 p.m. on the east coast of Australia and almost half the votes counted. Anthony, what have you got for us? What's the latest?
Well, I'll look at the national swing, 2.5%. Let's compare that to around the states. New South Wales, 2.6%. Let's get rid of that. And we'll look at Victoria, 0.5%. There's almost no swing in Victoria. I think some of that is caused by those teal seats. There's a two-party preferred swing of 10-15% against Labor because of the way these things are calculated and an estimate we're making. So Victoria has done well for Labor and done well for the Teal independents, but there's not much swing going on. If you look at Queensland, I'll get rid of Victoria. There's a 4% swing in Queensland, but a lot of that is resulting in Greens winning seats. There's not a lot of other seats changing hands. In South Australia, there's a, let me get rid of that, 2.4% swing, and it looks like Labor's, I haven't looked at Boothby and Sturt recently, but it's translating into something. But let's do this. This is the story, 9.9%. Western Australia, if Labor gets into government, into majority, it's because of Western Australia. That Western Australia has behaved completely differently from the rest of the country. It's a clear and very strong rejection of the Liberal Party and a big swing to the Labor Party. So Western Australia...
And we need to make sure the Liberal Party matches those values.
You said earlier that there are two things that people judge governments on. One is, are we in touch with what you care about? And the other one is, are we competent? If you look at the question of are we competent, through the pandemic, Australia on global measures came out of it as good as anywhere, with the economy and with health. So therefore, on competence, you should have been able to be re-elected, as state governments around the country were. So what is it that went so badly wrong if you ticked the competence box? Is it, was the out-of-touch factor so significant that it overrode that, or is there something else at play?
I think the out-of-touch factor in the seats where we have lost probably was the dominant factor. And now, there were chips at the competence question too, no doubt about that, in terms of some of the perceptions through the pandemic. I think if we're being fair, in all honesty, I'm not sure that those things could have been managed better during the course of the pandemic, and that we did get exceptionally good outcomes by global standards. But Australians are right to always want to make sure that no mistakes occur, and so they obviously held us to account on that. There are probably other little issues that clearly niggled too in that competence equation. Is I framed that as those two big questions that Australians ask and voters around the world ask when they're considering who they put into government, in the sense that I think what is clear is that the Labor Party also, with a horrifically low primary vote, didn't manage to win that competence question in the minds of voters either.
Well,
and on that point...
Defeat.
OK, I should also point out, Simon Birmingham corrected me before, that the Liberal gathering's not at the Sofitel Wentworth where it always is, because it was booked out tonight. So they're actually at the Fullerton Hotel. So we should be hearing from the Prime Minister pretty soon, but he's called to concede. So therefore, the question now is, how does and can Anthony Albanese form government?
Well, I mean, given the utter bloodbath that seems to be underway in the West, that's a pretty good base to work off. I think that earlier in the evening, we were looking at these votes going everywhere, and that is still the case, but they are coming home to Labor to the extent that there's a 2.7%, I think, swing nationally, which is going to translate into, if not outright government, then at least close enough with some crossbenchers that are going to be supportive.
Yeah, that you only then need 2 or 3 rather than, say, the whole lot.
Right. I mean, Tanya, what are you thinking?
Yeah, look, there's still quite a few on our too close to call list, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but...
You could probably say yay.
I'm feeling so much gay inside. I can't tell you how much gay there is in here. Just trying not to get ahead of ourselves. And, I'd really go back to the issues that have been big in this election. I really think we're in a very good place to have a positive agenda for the country with those crossbenchers, working with them.
Looks like a whole lot of new women coming into the parliament.
Fantastic.
Tanya, how would you feel about having a Teal or two in cabinet, if that's what they asked for?
Anthony's been very clear that he's not into making deals with the minor parties. He's been very emphatic about that in the lead-up to polling day. I think the Teals have been pretty clear about what they want.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, Tanya. Scott Morrison's just arrived at the podium to speak.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister there, bringing down the curtain on 9 years of coalition government. Our reporter Greg Jennett is at the Fullerton Hotel where the party faithful have gathered. Greg? Yeah.
Well, I expect Anthony will stick to what he's committed to do before the election, and I'd be very surprised if he was changing policies now. He's been really clear what our policy is. That's what we're going to do. He will be thinking about the next election. We've got 3 years to make sure that people understand when we make a commitment, we keep that commitment, and that'll set us up, I hope, for another very good result in a few years' time.
Laura mentioned that he's a very experienced negotiator from running government business in the House. I guess the challenge, though, is when you're Prime Minister, is he going to have the time when you've got that many crossbenchers to be negotiating with and massaging all of the...
Well, I'm sure the Manager of Government Business will be doing most of that, as Anthony did when he was the Manager of Government Business. But in establishing the relationship, in making sure that we can form government, in working out what the priorities are of the people that we're working with. I'm sure that he will play a very important initial role in that. The day-to-day stuff, who's going to vote which way on every piece of legislation, that's not a job for a Prime Minister for sure.
Ms Plibersek, do you think that tonight's result puts an end to the climate wars in Australia?
I think this is a really strong signal that people in city areas, in regional communities right across Australia are up for strong action on climate change, and we've got a really good climate change policy. I think in 3 years' time, do I think we will be having another election campaign where this is the same sort of issue? I hope not. And same goes for the Integrity Commission. In 3 years' time, we will have bedded down strong action on climate change, cheaper power prices. We will have bedded down a strong National Integrity Commission with teeth. And on the issue of the women's vote that we were talking about earlier, we have fantastic policies for women coming into this election on the gender pay gap, on investments to reduce violence against women and their children. In 3 years' time, I think we'll have a lot to show for that as well.
Tanya, what about the question of mandate? Labor's gone backwards by almost 2%.
I don't know how often I need to say this. A win's a win's a win. Right? So you're all very focused on the primary vote. We've seen that the primary vote has fractured everywhere. There's a rise of minor parties. That is undeniable. But if we come out of tonight with the ability to form government with some of these crossbenchers, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining about the primary vote. We're going to be celebrating that we get to implement a positive Labor agenda that will see relief for some of the cost of living pressures we've seen, that will see wages, particularly for those low-paid workers like those in aged care. We'll see growth there. We'll be implementing those policies I was talking about a second ago. I don't think people are going to be worried about the primary vote.
Simon, would you acknowledge that?
Look, I think forming government with fewer than 1 in 3 Australians having voted for you and without a majority in the floor of the House of Representatives is a very weak starting point for a government. That is just a statement of fact. Now, obviously, there's a lot of independence, as we're acknowledging, and so that will provide a basis for a Labor government to get things done and to govern, but nobody should pretend it's going to be a strong starting point. And if the Liberal Party can listen and unite in terms of listening to the messages the electorate has sent us today, and then unite in terms of how we respond to those, then we have an enormous opportunity.
You can't deny, though, Simon, that there would be a collective mandate on stronger action on climate change integrity?
Oh, I think I've acknowledged already tonight that on climate change, on gender and equality issues, I think there are very strong messages in relation to an Integrity Commission. I still hope that there will be some caution in the construct of an Integrity Commission. I don't think a New South Wales-type model that destroys reputations first and makes findings after is the right approach. I think the South Australian Labor model that Premier Peter Malinauskas supported in SA is a type that I hope, in terms of what is designed and developed, for the sake of people on all sides of politics and getting good people into politics, is the type of model that ought to be pursued, and I would want to support that type of model being implemented that is robust but also is fair.
OK, let's go to Anthony and do a seat run.
Don't.
I think it's really interesting that when the Prime Minister was thanking everyone, he was talking about police, soldiers, tradies. He didn't he didn't mention the nurses, the teachers, the others who kept us going through the pandemic. And I think it's just another indication, given all of the things that have happened tonight, this very strong message that equality is something that the electorate's demanding, that it was, again, just the blind spot.
Tanya, I had someone that I know who's a very active member of the Labor Party send me something on this exact issue, and it was a question for you. It's been a term plagued by the mistreatment of women in your workplace in Parliament House. Your party's pressed Mr Morrison repeatedly on his party's internal processes, and we've seen that reflected in the white-collar women's vote. Are your processes any better? Are there any examples of how Labor has fielded complaints against sitting MPs in the past, and how will it handle them going forward? Because I can tell you, when the Brittany Higgins story came out, there were quite a few Labor women and Labor staffers who were in touch on these issues.
I know. We began to strengthen our internal processes when I was the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party, and since then, Sharon Claydon, who's the Chair of Caucus, has done even more work. I think the combination of our strengthened internal Labor Party processes and the new regime that applies to everybody in Parliament House now, and the new supports that are there, does provide a safer environment for women working in Parliament House, whether they're staff or journalists or anybody working in the place. I think it is really important that we do provide a safe workplace in Parliament House, but also that we lead the national conversation and say that every Australian workplace should have really strong mechanisms for people to make complaints and before that, to change workplace culture so that inappropriate behaviour is less likely to happen. And so implementing all 55 recommendations of the Respect at Work report, for example, should be a very early action of our government.
How's a 9-year government, right? It's not just the Morrison government, it is a 9-year government. Andrew, how do you think history will remember the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison government?
Well, I think it was telling that Scott Morrison tried to say in recent weeks that he was seeking a second term. That says it all, doesn't it? Of course, it
was a fourth
coalition wasn't at all. But I think this Doctor Who type attempt at renewal just failed. I think there's been a lot of turmoil. I think that the climate argument has been at the heart of it. And Josh Frydenberg, I remember him being deeply upset when he tried to negotiate it. Deeply upset. It's been a disaster on that front. I think that Scott Morrison personally he'll be remembered more fondly than he is currently because of his role during the pandemic. I think there's absolutely no doubt that the Prime Minister, the Premiers and the Chief Ministers collectively did a marvellous job in minimising death. Lots of hiccups along the way for which he's paid dearly and the coalition has paid dearly. I think that Scott Morrison will also be will be remembered for the AUKUS agreement, which I presume Labor will wholeheartedly support. And the next few days with the Quad will be just fascinating to see how Anthony Albanese progresses some of those things.
One thing that I think history will record about this campaign, and I hope that there are lessons learned from it, is that the invocation of a divisive issue like trans women in sport, specifically as a means to try and harvest support in various areas around Australia, not only is just a real low point in our polity, totally, but also seems to have failed absolutely. And, I think you read into that what you will, it doesn't reflect well at all.
Well, the question is whether it was
I think it shows that people are tired of cynical politics as well. The idea that you can use a group of people for electoral advantage. And I think that, going forward now, it's going to be really important that we learn to disagree better. That politics has been so conflictual and so at times quite nasty in Australia in recent years. I think that is one of the reasons that we've seen the growth of these teal independence. They don't relate to that. And we've been talking about professional women. They don't relate to that. They don't want to see that behaviour at work. They don't want to see it at home. They certainly don't want to see it in their parliament.
But also, Tanya, things like, say, the Mediscare campaign in 2016, I asked Anthony Albanese about it last night because the election had been about character and trust, and so the question was framed around, you know, if you were telling the truth, well, where is it? Where's the privatised Medicare? Isn't it that also an issue for the public, that they're smart enough to know when they're being sold a pup, and that was over-egged? It wasn't actually a Liberal Party policy at all, and those are the kind of things that cause people to lose faith with politics.
OK, so there was a privatisation task force. Simon can remind you of it.
They didn't go
Tanya, come on. I've been pretty open.
And out-of-pocket expenses have gone up by a third and a half, depending whether you're talking about GPs or specialists.
Medicare.
I don't think anybody thinks Medicare's been operating as well as it should at the moment. But if you know, like, death tax. Where was our death tax?
Well,
and Tanya, this election campaign, the pensioner scare campaign, we couldn't have been clearer in ruling out again and again and again the extension of the cashless debit card.
So,
on Medicare again this election
without
campaign,
going to all of the
Medicare
issues,
again this election campaign, you took us accepting advice of expert panels about how the medical benefits scheme might be changed in terms of different items and how they're listed, and you turned it into a scare campaign saying we're cutting Medicare. Is an incoming Labor government not going to change any Medicare schedule items?
You sent out text messages today saying, ooh, there's a Coast Guard, you know, taking over an asylum seeker boat, vote Liberal.
I guess the point that we're making is that both major parties do this, and people are irritated by it.
And this is where I started, I guess, which is if we are going to have a healthy democracy, we have to learn to disagree better.
Anthony wants to take a look at the Senate. What have you got for us?
Start with the ACT, and this is where Labor, the Greens will get a quota. Labor on 1.7 is better positioned to win a seat. I suspect Pauline Hanson.
Anthony, sorry to interrupt you. We're just going to listen to Penny Wong addressing Labor faithful.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pretty quiet crowd tonight. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your support and for your patience this evening. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land? And saying to you that tonight we can take that step forward to fulfilling the promise of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So, friends, Australians have chosen. Australians have chosen, and they have chosen change. Australians have chosen, and they have chosen hope. Australians have chosen, and they have looked to the future. A better future for all. A government that will act on climate change. A government for women. A government that will look to unify, to bring people together, not to divide. A Labor government. An Albanese Labor government. Australians chose hope, and the man who embodies that hope is my friend, our leader, Anthony Albanese. Please welcome to the stage the man set to be the 31st Prime Minister of Australia.
Thank you. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and on behalf of the Australian Labor Party, I commit to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full. And I say to my fellow Australians, thank you for this extraordinary honour. Tonight, the Australian people have voted for change. I am humbled by this victory, and I'm honoured to be given the opportunity to serve as the 31st Prime Minister of Australia. My Labor team will work every day to bring Australians together, and I will lead a government worthy of the people of Australia. A government as courageous and hard-working and caring as the Australian people are themselves. Earlier tonight, Scott Morrison called me to congratulate myself and the Labor Party on our victory at the election. Scott very graciously wished me well, and I thanked him for that, and I wish him well. And I thank him for the service that he has given to our country as Prime Minister. I also want to acknowledge and thank Jenny Morrison and their two daughters for their contribution and sacrifice as well. My fellow Australians, it says a lot about our great country that the son of a single mum who was a disability pensioner, who grew up in public housing down the road in Camperdown, can stand before you tonight as Australia's Prime Minister. Can we, if you want to, I know it's been a long night, but if we can dial it down a little bit. Every parent wants more for the next generation than they had. My mother dreamt of a better life for me, and I hope that my journey in life inspires Australians to reach for the stars. I want Australia to continue to be a country that no matter where you live, who you worship, who you love, or what your last name is, that places no restrictions on your journey in life. My fellow Australians, I think they've got the name by now. I think they got that. I know at the beginning of the campaign they said people didn't know me, but I reckon they've got it. Down. No. Can we have order, please? Can we have a bit of order? I intend to run an orderly government, and it starts here, so behave. During this campaign, I have put forward a positive, clear plan for a better future for our country. And I have shared the two principles that will drive a government that I lead. No one left behind, because we should always look after the disadvantaged and the vulnerable. but also no one held back, because we should always support aspiration and opportunity. That is what my government will do. That is the what, but the how is also just as important, because I want to bring Australians together. I want to seek our common purpose and promote unity and optimism, not fear and division. It is what I have sought to do throughout my political life, and what I will bring to the leadership of our country. It is a show of strength to collaborate and work with people, not weakness. I want to find that common ground where together we can plant our dreams. To unite around our shared love of this country, our shared faith in Australia's future, our shared values of fairness and opportunity, and hard work and kindness to those in need. And I can promise all Australians this: no matter how you voted today, the government I lead will respect every one of you every day. And I'll seek to get your vote next time. We are the greatest country on earth. But we can have an even better future if we seize the opportunities that are right there in front of us. The opportunity to shape change rather than be shaped by it. And we can shape change more effectively if we seek to unite people on that journey of change. Together, we can end the climate wars. Together, we can take advantage of the opportunity for Australia to be a renewable energy superpower. Together, we can work in common interests with business and unions to drive productivity, to lift wages and profits. I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around. Together, we can as a country say that all of us, if the Fair Work Commission don't cut the wage of minimum wage workers, we can say, will we welcome that? Absolutely. Together we can strengthen universal health care through Medicare, we can protect universal superannuation. And we can write universal childcare into that proud tradition. Together we can fix the crisis in aged care. Together we can make full and equal opportunity for women a national economic and social priority. Together we can and will establish a National Anti-Corruption Commission. Together we can be a self-reliant, resilient nation, confident in our values and in our place in the world. And together we can embrace the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We can answer its patient, gracious call for a voice enshrined in our Constitution. Because all of us ought to be proud that amongst our great multicultural society, we count the oldest living continuous culture in the world. And I acknowledge Australia's next Indigenous Affairs Minister, Linda Burney, who's here. Now my fellow Australians, no one gets here by themselves, and I wouldn't be standing here tonight without the support, hard work and belief of so many people. To my parliamentary team, including my Deputy Richard Marles and my Senate Leader Penny Wong. My terrific economic team led by Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher. On Monday morning, arrangements are in place to have these people sworn in as members of my team. To enable Penny and I to attend the important Quad Leaders meeting in Tokyo with President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Modi. And I want the leaders of the economic team to start work on Monday morning as well. I want to thank my shadow ministry and my amazing caucus members, including the people who are here tonight at this joint function from in the corner of our seats, including Tony Burke, who's here. I want to thank all of our Labor candidates. I want to thank all those who've worked so hard for this victory. We stand on your shoulders, the parliamentary party. Most rank-and-file members of the Labor Party will never ask for anything. They knock on doors, they make calls, they work so hard, they hand out how-to-votes. They push the cause of Labor at the local PNC, at the side of the local kids' footy, at the local netball, when they're shopping in the supermarket, when they talk to their neighbours. I thank each and every one of the true believers of the Australian Labor Party. And I proudly thank the members of the mighty trade union movement. I do want to thank my campaign director, our amazing National Secretary Paul Erickson and his team. My staff are led by Tim Gartrell, who was my first campaign director back in 1996. And my electorate office team, who haven't seen that much of me, who look after this electorate, led by Helen Rogers. Thank you very much. But to all those, and I'm not going to name them because they're too many, there's a lot of people who believed in me and backed me over many decades in this great movement to be where I am today. You know who you are, and I know who you are, and I thank you. Now, I said during the campaign that I've been underestimated my whole life. Now, while that's all is true, I've also been lifted up by others who saw something in me. and who encouraged me in life on this journey. And I pledge to the Australian people here tonight, I am here not to occupy the space, but to make a positive difference each and every day. And to the amazing diverse people of Grainler. All politics is local. And in 1996, there were various people who wrote off the chances of Labor holding on to that seat. This is my 10th election, and I want to say thank you for placing your faith in me. It is an absolute honour to be your voice in our national parliament. To my partner, Jodie Hayden, thank you for coming into my life and for sharing this journey. And to my proudest achievement, my son Nathan. Thank you, mate, for your love and support. Your mother who's here tonight, Carmel. We are both so proud of the caring, wonderful, smart young man you have become.
Love you, Nathan.
To my mum, Mary Ann, who's beaming down on us, thank you. And I hope there are families in public housing watching this tonight. Because I want every parent to be able to tell their child, no matter where you live or where you come from, in Australia the doors of opportunity are open to us all. And like every other Labor government, we'll just widen that door a bit more. Friends, we have made history tonight. And tomorrow, together, we begin the work of building a better future. A better future for all Australians. Thank you very much.
Anthony Albanese there, Australia's 31st Prime Minister, claiming victory tonight for the Labor Party. Patricia Karvelis is there with the Labor faithful. The excitement is just pummelling through the screen, Patricia.
It really is, Lee. It is electric in this room, and in fact it has been for some time. The Labor faithful have gathered, of course, and have been cheering all night, overwhelmed with what is a historic victory for the Labor Party, of course. Now,